Here in Canada, we generate the most waste per capita in the world. Therefore, our team, Enough, has decided to map the shitstorm that is the waste crisis. We visualize this system by using the analogy of a city going through a storm. The city represents society, the storm represents the waste crisis, and houses represent the different environments of different communities. The holes in the ceilings represent vulnerabilities each of these communities suffer from. The buckets represent temporary solutions to mitigate the leaking from those vulnerabilities, but those buckets are clearly inadequate, especially in the long term. The construction workers on top of some roofs are trying to fix the holes, and they represent some semi-systemic solutions being attempted. The factory represents economic drivers, and the emissions from those factories represent consumption. The house in the middle represents the environment of affluent communities, and we see that these houses have the fewest holes and the most resources. The house on the right represents the environment of under-resourced communities, and they have more vulnerabilities and fewer resources. The house on the left represents the environment of BIPOC communities as well as communities in Asia and Africa. That house has the most vulnerabilities and the least resources. This map will focus on three specific vulnerabilities: plastic waste, landfills, and food insecurity. So first, we will start with plastic waste, which affects everyone. Now, did you know that you are eating plastic even if you are a vegan, toddler, or an unborn baby? Scientists recently obtained pictures of microplastic beads in the root of lettuce and weeds. Another study found that plastic baby bottles release millions of microplastic particles after going through procedures typically used to prepare baby formula. Dozens of dyed microplastic particles have even been found in the placentas of unborn babies. Our society depends on recycling, consignment, and compostable plastic to mitigate that vulnerability. However, recycling is a greenwashing myth. Only 9% of what Canadians put in a recycling bin actually gets recycled. This is because recycling is financially unviable for many kinds of plastic. Our blue bins are very contaminated. The recycling stamp regulations are so unclear that companies use them on unrecyclable products as a marketing tactic. The consignment system in Quebec creates counterproductive financial incentives. The complicated rules discourage people from obtaining their consignment deposits, transforming the unclaimed deposits into a revenue stream for stores. Compostable plastic is another greenwashing myth. We took the picture on the top right during a visit to a big composting facility in Quebec. The composting heap is littered with plastic. Now, many governments have announced plans to ban some single-use plastics. Kenya has implemented the world's toughest plastic ban 3 years ago that is enforced by fines and even jail time. Despite the many successes of the Kenyan ban, Kenya is still drowning in plastic because companies simply switch to other kinds of plastics not included in the ban. Next, let's talk about landfills, which do not affect affluent communities. Landfills pollute drinking water, are an emitter of greenhouse gases, and are practically free. In addition to the solutions discussed for plastic waste, our society also depends on reuse, donations, and composting to address the landfill's vulnerabilities. However, 2/3 of what people donate for reuse end up in landfills. Everything ends up in landfills or oceans eventually. And composting could, in theory, mitigate the impact of about half of what we send to landfills from residential areas and institutions. However, because landfills are heavily subsidized by taxpayers, there is a massive financial disincentive for institutions to implement composting at a large enough scale to make a measurable impact. A semi-systemic solution aimed at electronic waste is the new laws from the European Union that ensures that appliances can be repaired for up to 10 years. These laws have not been implemented long enough for us to assess their impacts. Lastly, let's talk about food insecurity, which does not affect affluent communities. Over 4 million Canadians, including 1.4 million children, struggle to access healthy food, all while we as a society throw away more food than what we can eat. However, to redirect all of Canada's food surplus from landfills to food insecure communities, we would need 10,000 organizations the size of Second Harvest, which is Canada's largest. Finally, we must pay attention to what we are doing with those buckets. In Canada, we build landfills near BIPOC communities. We ship our contaminated recycling and toxic electronic waste to Asia and Africa. We represent the systemic environmental racism by a person pouring water buckets on top of the house representing BIPOC Asia and Africa. Fundamentally, we need to take ownership of our waste. If we had to deal with our waste, we would not generate so much of it. This brings us to take a step back and reconsider this system. The holes are not the main problem, it is the shitstorm. The waste crisis exists because of our overconsumption. No plan can possibly succeed without addressing the fundamentally social problem at the root of the waste crisis. Unlike normal storms, this shitstorm will not go away on its own. There are no magic tricks that can put an end to the waste crisis. We hope this map identifies gaps and guides systemic challenges and changes we collectively drive, because the only way to address the waste crisis is to take credible, evidence-based action together. Thank you.